Good morning, welcome to Tuesday, January 10th, 2023's meeting of the Municipal Airport Authority. Happy New Year, everyone. Everybody on the call, if you keep your phones or devices muted until you wish to speak, we'd appreciate it. Anybody in the audience, if you're going to speak here, please come up in front of the, like Joan and myself, and speak so we can hear you clearly. First thing is we will approve the minutes of the regular meeting held December 20th. Motion.
I have a question regarding the minutes. They're not in front of me, but I recall reading on the part about the advertising budget that it was $234,000 for the third year of our contract with Flint. I thought that was $170,000.
That was just the advertising, but then there were some other charges on the back of that sheet.
Okay,
Up to that.
so then it's how much per year of the 3-year contract? So 234 is the remainder, like our third year.
Varies. So
Okay.
this is a production year, and it's not really a 3-year contract, it's a 3-year cycle in the new advertising campaign, so they run in 3-year cycles. So you approved a new concept for advertising at the last one, so it's a whole new process that they're doing. So that would be the most that it could be, plus it also includes the college.
Okay, so then next year we'll be approving a new 3-year.
No, not the concept. You'll
Okay.
You'll approve the 2024 marketing plan. But the concept, so what you're gonna see on radio, TV, newspaper, social media, that's what's new for a 3-year period.
Okay,
But you all said that you have the option to change that if you like. If you want to change course or direction on what you're seeing in social media. That's okay. But their intent is to run the other campaign.
so how much longer is our contract with Flint?
It's a year to year.
Year to year, okay.
Yep.
I'd like to move that maybe before we approve another contract with Flint, that we have maybe 2 more marketing firms give us presentations, bids.
It's really not a bid because it's all based on their buying power with Foreign Communications and the other firms in town are set up differently in terms of like the buying powers. What do they bring to the table? Firms that they represent. So it's really not an apples to apples comparison.
Mr. Chairman,
Certainly take proposals from the firms, that's not a problem.
I think just the proposals, the concepts, see what else they have out there.
It's big number.
All right, motion for the minutes.
Do we include this motion first?
It's not on the agenda, so we'd have to have it as discussion at the end or bring it in.
Move to suspend the
Make a motion to approve the minutes as published.
Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
The only thing I'll add is that, so when you approve the concept for them that they plan to run for the next 3 years, whatever it's gonna look like on radio TV, they have an upfront cost to prepare that. So keep that in mind if you take proposals from next, you have that upfront cost that you propose.
I just didn't like that it was a 3-year, you're committed to it for 3 years. I mean, that's
Just the concept that they.
Yeah, the concept.
I just think we're in a very transitional time right now of how we reach people, you know what I mean? The form is really not published every day. There's people are streaming TV, I just would like to see what other companies might bring to the table for different ideas to reach our public, so.
I did see their post yesterday that the East Economy Lot is open.
I saw that as well.
All right, any other discussion? None, roll call.
Lynn?
Aye.
Oscar?
Aye.
Capitan, are you on?
I'm trying to get on. Am I on?
You're on. What's your vote, yea or nay?
Yay.
Okay.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. All right, moving on to number 2, airport vouchers totaling $479,101.71. Any discussion? Any discussion? None? Roll call. Motion please, sir. I assume you would.
I'll make a motion to approve the vouchers as published.
Motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Motion for 2 seconds. Any other discussion? None?
Lind,
Yes.
Cosgrove,
Aye.
Capitan,
Aye.
Ekman,
Aye.
Aye. Moving on to number 3, individual vouchers A through H. Any discussion? Concerns? None? Motion please.
Make a motion to approve the individual vouchers, A through H.
You have a motion? We get a second?
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion? None? Roll call.
Lind,
Aye.
Cosgrove,
Aye.
Capitan,
Aye.
Ekman,
Aye.
Aye. Number 4, receive November financials.
Mr. Chairman, as we're coming up on year end here, I just didn't have a lot of time to go through the financials, but with year end, could we schedule maybe 15, 20 minutes to go through I guess the major statement is what, 561 operations. Currently, just looking quickly through November, our actuals are at 5.9 million. Our year end is budgeted for 9.8 million. There might be a lot of adjustments in there, but I just think it'd be beneficial and good governance to go kind of very quickly, line by line, look at the variances, what caused them, what actions might be taken. Yeah, so if we could get the report that would give us actual for the past year, the budget for the past year, and then the budget for the coming year, we can kind of see if there's things. Because it is a little concerning in that account to be about 4 million out of whack at this point. I know there's lots of reasons for it. We can dig into each of those, but just kind of.
All right, we'll make a note of that. So
the primary parking revenue is ahead and that's the federal grants, those are.
Yeah, I just think, Sean, it'd be good governance that each of us can understand all of the sub-accounts that make those up. What are the items that we have influence over? What are the items that are sort of things we can't control? And so when we have year end, if we've got actual budget and then what I call forecast, for the next year, we can start to see where we're going, what's happening, what are the drivers on it. It's good to know, not every time, but all the minutia that makes up each of those line items and where there's control points, where there's reaction points.
And hopefully we don't have period 14, 15, 16, and 17 of the year 2022 would be our goal.
Well, and even this differential here, when we look at the bottom line in November, could be timing or whatever. So I think it helps us all get a better grasp for what's happening at different levels.
Can you get a motion on the receiving?
Yep, I'd move to receive the November financials and.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? No other discussion, none. Roll call.
Lind,
Aye.
Cosgrove,
Aye.
Capitan,
Aye.
Ekman,
Aye.
Mann.
Aye.
Aye.
Move on to number 5, receive results of the visual preference survey.
Okay, Brandon Halverson is on from UConn. Go ahead, Brandon.
All right, good morning, everybody. Hope you had pleasant holidays with friends and family. We did collect all the information from the visual preference survey that we had in December, and both online and written, and compiled that. Just wanted to just kind of give you an overview, share the results, and respond to any questions that you might have on that. Aside from that, before we get into that, just a progress update. We're going through a slew of listening sessions over the next couple weeks with the user groups throughout throughout the airport, such as the airlines and Artworks. We met with Artworks yesterday and other user groups. As we collect that information along with this visual preference survey, it really gives us a lot of introspect on moving forward and putting together some design options. So I'm gonna share my screen here. Darren, can you give me rights to share screen?
That work?
There we go. Okay. Thanks. All right. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a summary of the visual preference survey, just question by question. I'll just give an overview. Bigger picture, we had 33 participants and 46 responses. What that means is some people responded multiple times, which is good. They had more than just one thing to say on some of the questions. And then average engagement means some people didn't respond to all the questions. So of these 33 people, they responded to 73% of the questions. That skewed a little bit because we had an open-ended activity. Number 13 was an open-ended question, and we just took those questions as they came and didn't really ask anybody to submit them. It was more verbal. So starting off, these should sound familiar. The first item, one word positively describes Fargo. We received a lot of good words to growth, bison farming, welcoming, friendly, downtown community. We found common threads in these as well. As we move forward, you'll see in some of the other questions, some of these words pop up as well. A lot of friendlies, you'll see it multiple times. Welcoming, friendly, yeah. So you'll see that in this executive summary, some of the things that came up multiple times that where multiple people had responded. What do you like most about the existing terminal? Wayfinding was one, easy, quick access, not stressful. These are some things that we want to make sure that we maintain or improve as part of the renovation expansion. Not having to walk far. They like the big windows. So kudos to the airport at this point for all these things as being clean, ease of use, wayfinding. These are things we want to hold on to as we move forward with the renovation and expansion. What could be improved at the existing terminal? Faster baggage claim. Some of these things were more modern, better concourse flow, design concessions opportunities. So concessions after security, that was a common one. Bigger departure lounges with more seating, larger gate space, larger waiting rooms, dining and concessions. Those were some common ones that we were seeing in here. Dining, And these are things that we kind of picked up on during the study as well. So it's kind of confirming what we thought were some challenges. Top 3 airport amenities that so it's the top 3 that are a priority to you. Topped out with comfortable seating, concessions, and daylighting and views to the airfield. Those were the tops. You'll see the +1s and +2s next to these. These were written responses, so we added those into the mix here of what was tallied electronically. Top 3 design priorities. Beautiful design. That was very important to a majority of people. Architects love to hear that. Resilient, being durable, weather-tight, maintenance-free. Totally recognize that. Regional character, being relatable to the region. We were really happy to see that as well, because that some of these other questions where we're trying to pick up what you see or your perception of the region and how we can incorporate that into the design. So that was a priority as well. Sustainability was up there too, and that's in today's culture, that's really encouraging to see. Choose top 3 words describing the new terminal expansion. The biggest one: dynamic, iconic, exciting. So we're seeing that people really want to see this expansion make an impact, be recognized. List any regional influences, historic, economic, social, natural, that can be reflected in the design. We've got a great list here. Bison, the plains, agricultural technology, the river, Scandinavian, German heritage. North Dakota had the largest farms in the USA at the turn of the century. Things that people may not know about it: lakes, prairies. Prairies was a common one. Agriculture, bison. I think were the most common. What are the economic drivers that are critical to long-term prosperity of Greater Fargo? The downtown, university, education, tourism, technology, businesses, agriculture. I think, it seemed to be a mix of like technology, education, agriculture. Like those were some of the bigger common threads that we were seeing. What would you like a first-time visitor to know about Fargo? This was a really interesting one because, as we're learning more about your community, as we, engage with you and others, this picked up on a lot here beyond what Fargo nationally may be recognized for, or more of a local perspective. Unique and vibrant downtown, absolutely. Sunsets are unbeatable, growth-oriented, progressive and diverse, family-friendly, people are friendly, lots of things to do, welcoming and growing. Those are very, very encouraging and very create a lot of interest in a community when you start looking at it from those perspectives and hearing those phrases. A first-time visitor would be surprised to learn about Fargo. We got great restaurants, great hospitals, actually 3 towns, Moorhead and West Fargo. Friendliest people that, you know, we're hearing this time in, you know, in each of these questions. Friendly community, friendly people, safe community. Number of region and national businesses, Bison, not a tiny town, very true. A lot of diversity, hearing that from different perspectives. Top rated breweries and restaurants, clean air, great schools, great art, theater, and culture, vibrant, fast growing. Technology, here's one for home to second largest Microsoft campus, leaders in business, and a great history. And we get to some of the visual, the actual visual questions where we had images and asked people just to react to them on a general sense. Don't dial into any one thing, but it would be as if you were just to walk into a space and your initial reaction. So what ranked first? One of the images that shows it's more, gives you more of a warm feeling walking in, warm wood tones, warmer color temperatures and lighting, natural light views, big expansive views. That ranked the first. And then the second, what we're picking up on some of these other images is that the openness, you really like the openness, not feeling, you know, high ceilings. I think the atrium that you have there, people like that sort of space. And then the other set of images that we shared with you, the top image was a lot of glazing, a very modern perspective with a lot of glazing and before like wood tones, maybe like wood, the sense of wood structure and shelter. Big open spaces, roomy, so people don't feel like they're compact or compressed into a space. So this first round of getting visual cover really gives us a ground, a good place to start. I know that some of you, it was difficult to look at an image and say, well, what part? There's some pieces that I really like about it, and I think everybody did a really good job of, you know, taking a step back and looking at it and just giving it that first reaction, because that's what we're looking for. That's what we're looking for at this level, and then we can start dialing into some of the different elements as we develop the design. And I think that is it. I sent this on to Sean and Darren, and they have this. If you want to look at this in more detail or have any questions on it, feel free to reach out to myself or through Sean and Darren, and be happy to talk through it further. Any questions? Any surprises that you saw there that you weren't expecting?
No, thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Anything from the board?
I think it was a fun interaction and good engagement from everybody who took part.
All right. Moving on to number 6, presentation by Landline.
Okay, Nick Johnson is on from Landline. you'll wanna share a screen, I think, so Nick?
Good morning, everyone. Can you see my presentation okay?
Yes.
Great. All right, so just to introduce myself really quickly, I'm the Vice President, Head of Commercial and Network Planning for Landline. For those of you who haven't heard of Landline, we are a multimodal connection company that extends airline networks and connects airports and communities to airline networks seamlessly. So a little bit about myself. I have been working at Landline and lead marketing, network planning, commercial sales, and airport affairs. And then prior to Landline, worked for almost a decade at Delta Airlines in network planning and revenue management type roles. So I'm really excited to kind of, work with different airports, communities, and airlines to grow access to air service and, make, reverse some of the trends in different areas that we're seeing as a result of pilot shortage. So wanted to kind of just start with the concept of what we're proposing. So a little bit of background, we have a partnership with Sun Country, as well as American Airlines and United Airlines. But for the purposes of this proposal, we work very closely with Sun Country Airlines. And we're almost, I'd say we're kind of like the scout team for demand with Sun Country. So we've launched service from Duluth, Minnesota to Minneapolis, from Rochester and Mankato. And, the cool thing about our service is it allows for a much lower cost than running a regional jet for airlines like Sun Country and others to test out the demand and, capture new demand and stimulate demand into the network. So what we're proposing with Sun Country is starting Fargo to Minneapolis in March of 2023 and using our premium motor coach service to link the Fargo community to Sun Country's network and to unlock access to a number of communities across, a number of different cities across Sun Country's network, including Vegas, Orlando, Phoenix, Fort Myers, Tampa, Los Angeles. You can see the numbers in the list here. And we've been super successful at doing this with Duluth and Rochester, and have really allowed those airports to tap into new demand and then also support the air, grow and actually support new Sun Country air service out of those areas as well. So I think the goal here is that we want to basically be a integrated, seamless provider, one ticket itinerary with Sun Country and serving Fargo. And so I think that there's a lot of really cool opportunities for us to partner together, and that there's a lot of demand and willingness to travel to and from the Fargo community. So I'll give a little bit of an overview of how it works in case you haven't kind of heard of us before. But basically the way it works is that you can search on Google Flights or on Expedia, and it links you to suncountry.com. You would Google Fargo to Fort Myers, for example, or you would put that into the search parameters, and then you would actually be presented that itinerary on suncountry.com along with a price, and you buy your ticket just like any other flight. And that's how our partnerships with American Airlines work in Philadelphia. That's how our partnership with United works in Denver, and it's what Duluth and Rochester with Sun Country do today. Then once the customer has their itinerary, they would actually be dropped off for park at Hector International Airport for check-in. So they check in at a Sun Country counter in the airport, and then they check their bags, and their bags are tagged. Then the customer boards the Landline segment for the journey to MSP. Their bags are tagged, and they don't touch them again until they get to their final destination, which is Fort Myers, Florida. And after the journey on the motor coach, arrive landside at MSP Terminal 2. The check bags are taken by Landline staff directly to the belts, and so the customer doesn't have to touch them again. And then the customers proceed directly to the TSA checkpoints at Terminal 2 at MSP, and then to their gate, and they never have to think about their boarding pass or bag again. So the cool things about this is that for the customer, it reduces a lot of stress. You can check in at Fargo. You don't have to check in with the super busy counters and TSA checkpoints and counters at MSP. You don't have to deal with the bag check there. then your connection is protected. If for whatever reason there's like a highway shutdown, you'll be rebooked automatically onto the next Sun Country flight, as opposed to if you were driving or if there was a weather issue, then you would be out of luck. So we find that customers are really embracing the opportunity, just because it gives a new option at low cost to connect into air service. Benefits for, there's a lot of benefits for customers, for airlines, but also for airports. And I think obviously relevant to the discussion today, as kind of hinted at earlier, the benefits for Fargo Airport and for airports in general is that this, connecting to landline, it adds new service, generates incremental airport fees, rents, and parking revenue. A lot of people, even though there's great air service out of Fargo, still, upwards of 400, 500 people drive themselves to MSP, to and from MSP for, air service with low-cost carriers or whatever it is. And so the cool thing about this is it doesn't take away air service. It actually captures people who are just driving on the highway today, and it allows the airport like Fargo to monetize that. And then also, importantly, capture that demand into the database of demand that airline network planners look at all the time when they're making new market decisions. And I think that's the really cool opportunity that we've been talking about with Fargo Airport and with Sun Country, is that it stimulates new measurable demand that you can capture and then paves the way for potential future air service development. So if you started a Fargo to Minneapolis route, and then customers really embrace connections onward to Orlando or to Fort Myers, and this is, by the way, exactly what happened with Duluth, is we started our partnership with Sun Country in Duluth, and then 1 or 2 years later, Sun Country saw enough demand and enough economic opportunity that they then launched 2 times a week nonstop service to Phoenix and to Fort Myers as a result. So we, again, really reinforcing that we're the scout team for Sun Country in terms of extending their network, exploring new communities at lower costs than, what it would be if they, started with plane service, and then they can go in and invest and add service to communities and to destinations where people are, showing with their wallet every day. For the customer, there's a lot of benefits as well. Mentioned that you're seamlessly integrating air and ground transportation onto one experience under one travel itinerary. You're unlocking new lower fare opportunities for customers. You are having an enhanced product facilitated by the economics on board. So we take a motor coach, but we really outfit it in a luxury manner on board. We take off a bunch of seats, and we make it really comfortable. So there's a lot of legroom. It's basically almost like a domestic first class aircraft in terms of the amount of legroom and space that each customer has. And then we of course have features like seamless bag transfer and connection guarantee. So that's a little bit of a visual of kind of what our onboard product looks like potentially. Just a background a little bit on landline is, we're working with a number of different carriers today. Sun Country, of course, was our first partner, and they're really valuable to us, and we'll continue to expand with Sun Country. And as I mentioned, a huge benefit for Sun Country. We've carried, 60,000 passengers to date, and we support the Sun Country network by allowing, these sub-daily Duluth and Rochester to Phoenix and Fort Myers. We basically allow customers to go to those destinations every single day of the week, once or twice a day. We have a partnership with United in Denver and Newark, where there's a very strong and high Net Promoter Score. I think our Net Promoter Score is 65 or 70. So it just really shows that customers embrace this concept and are, using this as an alternative to driving themselves, and it gives them another itinerary option. And then our most recent partnership is with American Airlines in Philadelphia, where we operate 3 different cities to Philadelphia and are planning to be airside, so that you can actually clear TSA from the spokes sometime in the near future. Just a little bit of additional, background on, how landline works, and I think that's really cool is, we showing here a little example of, American Airlines with landline in Philadelphia to Allentown. So American Airlines has a flight from Allentown to Chicago, and so you can take an outbound flight. If you're based in Allentown, you can take a flight from Allentown to Chicago, and you're returning home back to Allentown after a business trip or a vacation. You can take a flight from Chicago to Philly and then transfer seamlessly on that same itinerary back to Allentown using landline. And the same thing happened with Sun Country, as I mentioned. So we started service in 2019 from Duluth to Minneapolis. You could connect on to Phoenix or Fort Myers, and then in earlier in 2022, Sun Country launched nonstop service. And so this dynamic in this graphic is showing how you could start or end your journey on a landline connection, and that just gives you that option to take different paths and different days of week, whether it's connecting over Minneapolis or taking the nonstop. And I think again the amount of demand in Fargo I think is naturally attractive to Sun Country in terms of air service, and landline is just something that allows them to get their foothold in the market faster, because Sun Country has resource and pilot constraints, and the risk is higher than launching service with us. And so that's something that we're excited about. Is we can actually launch service within 6 to 8 weeks in Fargo, and then that spools up the process of showing what the demand looks like for future flight opportunities. And then I'll just kind of close with this. This is a case study of how landline works, and that in the case of Sun Country's Duluth to Phoenix route, it's actually increased revenue by nearly 10%. And so it reduces the risk for Sun Country in terms of actually operating these spoke, at least with regard to them, like Duluth to Phoenix or Duluth to Fort Myers. Using landline allows them to have more people start and end their journey in Duluth. The alternative to taking landline and the Sun Country combination is that customers would just drive themselves to MSP and take Delta or take any number of low-cost carriers nonstop from MSP. But since they can actually park at Duluth Airport, and you can see this graphic here to the left, this shows that Sun Country operates on Mondays and Fridays, but that landline Sun Country operates every day, twice a day. And so you can, if you want to leave on Friday to go to Phoenix, but you have to come back on Tuesday, if you were just taking the nonstop flights, then you couldn't do that. But with landline, you can take the nonstop out and then the landline connection with Sun Country back on Tuesday or on Wednesday or any of the days that the nonstop doesn't operate. So it really is a way for Sun Country to capture that incremental and additional passenger demand to the tune of a lot of passengers. So here you can see that the nonstop leg, or Sun Country was able to capture nearly 10% more total revenue by using the landline connections. So again, kind of just to recap, we're excited to potentially be partnering with Fargo between Sun Country and landline. I think it'll be a really great opportunity for customers, for the airport, and for Sun Country as well, in terms of being able to see the demand and the potential in Fargo. So with that, that's the end of the presentation, and we'll open up for any questions.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple questions.
Yes.
How many trips a week did you say you were going to do from Fargo to Minneapolis?
Great question. So because Sun Country pulls down their bank structure on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, we're envisioning 5 to 6 times a week service from Fargo to Minneapolis. And I realized I didn't actually, I just breezed over the schedule, but basically the way Sun Country's network works is that we would leave Fargo around 9:50 in the morning, drive to MSP, and there's a big bank of flights that leaves anywhere between 3 and 4:30 p.m. And so it would seamlessly connect to one of Sun Country's biggest, most powerful banks at MSP. And then the other way, Sun Country has a number of flights from all over the U.S. That come back, and they arrive back at MSP between kind of 1 and 3 p.m. And so we would have a return leg back to Fargo at 4:30 p.m. and would have that seamless connection. So taking all those customers in and then funneling them back up to Fargo.
Okay. Also, I was wondering, can you carry handicap accessible people with handicap needs?
Yes.
And pets is the other one,
Yes.
like service pets and
Pets.
yes.
I believe on pets, I think if it's service, so I'll have to follow up on that, because I think it's specific to the Sun Country policy. We follow what their policy is, but I think with pets, I'll follow up on that. I'll get back to you.
I was just curious, so. With the low-cost carriers in Minneapolis, Spirit, Southwest, and Alaska, you should probably try and pair with them too, so. Good opportunity.
Yeah,
I'm done.
definitely.
Other than parking revenue for the airport, how does this benefit the Hector Airport and the Fargo Airport? Because we try to get people to fly out of Fargo because it's more convenient than driving to Minneapolis.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, I completely understand that perspective. I think, I think the goal here is to, recapture people who are driving. There are 400, 500 plus people a day from Fargo alone, and I think another 200 to 300 from Grand Forks who just drive because it's cheaper, because they whatnot, it's their convenience, and so this allows the airport to recapture that and then actually monetize that. So yes, parking is one of them, but we also will pay a PFC, so $4.50 for every passenger that boards at Hector International Airport, and so it's a new source of fee revenue for the airport, and then we'll also be buying counter space as well, so the real estate. But I think the ultimate benefit is that this is a way to generate new air service from a different carrier than the existing portfolios of carriers. So it's something that helps bring Sun Country air service to Fargo faster, just like I mentioned what happened at Duluth, and what's happening. It's instead of weakening air service, it actually strengthens the air service and the business case for air service, because airlines don't like leaving operations kind of out, without connections to their bigger hubs, and so this actually strengthens the opportunity to bring in new air service, while also providing a low cost option for certain customers. Certain customers will trade price for longer elapsed time, longer journeys, and this is just an additional consumer choice again that brings more O&D traffic into Fargo. So.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, interesting concept. Have you done any studies? It sounds like you're relatively new to this, but of sort of the cannibalization of the existing flights that you would then change from Fargo to Minneapolis. I think that's kind of what you're getting at, Paula. Is what happens to the other airlines? And the second thing, you're an interstate carrier. Can people just buy the bus service, point to point, from Hector to MSP?
Were you able to
Is
hear
this a
that?
question for me?
Yes.
So, yeah, so I'll take each one as it goes. So cannibalization. So we actually, that's a great question, because we actually find that it doesn't cannibalize air service. It actually strengthens air service because it, first of all, stimulates more travel demand. Definitely for the carrier that's buying and working with us on the service, but also in terms of just getting more people to actually use the airport. And I'm sure I know the Fargo Airport has a higher utilization, for example, per population than Duluth, but not everyone uses the airport, and I think we know that as prices and prices go down, that more consumption of a service goes up, and so I know you guys have an existing amount of low-cost carrier service, but there's not a ton of low-cost carrier service, and it's almost different customer bases. By providing lower cost, Sun Country pricing connected to this, you're actually stimulating and bringing new people into travel to new destinations. So, I know Allegiant offers nonstop service to, leisure places a few times a week. And actually, the cool thing about Sun Country service with landline is that you could actually conceivably strengthen the propensity for travel out of Fargo by using a nonstop Allegiant flight one way, and then they don't operate back on another day of week, and you could actually take another direction, Sun Country landline back, so you could fly to Orlando nonstop or you could fly to, Nashville nonstop. But you want to return on a different day of weekend, so you could actually use the Sun Country landline option to get back. And so someone who would never travel or would travel once every 3 years might actually be able to afford, one trip a year, and then that just inducts new passengers and new opportunities to capture that air service demand into your network. So.
And then if you just wanted to purchase the bus service and make your own connections out of Minneapolis, would that be available?
Yes, so we could offer that. That's something that, helps to defray the cost. While it's a lot cheaper than than running a regional jet, it's still, not still an expensive service. And so selling the, nonstop, and we kind of more think of it, especially for Fargo to Minneapolis, as just giving people another way to get to the Twin Cities affordably. It's, probably not that many people are going to be using this service as a way to get to, air service that wouldn't be connected to Fargo. It would probably more be used, like you could sell it, and the airport could monetize on that traffic from Fargo to MSP, and then you could connect onward to Mall of America on the train, or you could, have a friend pick you up in the cities. There's not many great ways to get from Fargo to MSP on public transportation, especially public transportation with this level of kind of luxury amenity on board. So.
Well, and then the unanswerable question is that I can see your point that this could help demonstrate to Sun Country or other airlines market demand, but the more successful you are with landline, the less likely they're going to want to run a flight out of Fargo. So is there any discussion of trigger points that would allow to move those flight operations from Fargo to Minneapolis?
So I think, I would disagree on the first point around that, as the landline service becomes more successful, that would be less likely for Sun Country to add service. I would actually argue that as the landline service fills with more Sun Country passengers, and it's going to be to a variety of different destinations, but there's clearly going to be there's strengths in the Sun Country network. There's, it's Vegas, it's Fort Myers, it's Orlando, it's Phoenix, Tampa. And so those are the high likelihood of markets that would probably, if you were flowing a certain number of passengers on board, that would result in nonstop service from Fargo into one of those leisure destinations. And I couldn't comment on Sun Country's willingness to convert our service into a flight from Fargo to Minneapolis. I know that's something that's discussed, but I think we should.
I have one more question. When the landline service would be paired with the Sun Country flight, is that a separate ticket then, or does that bundle in with the cost of the Sun Country flight?
That's bundled in with the Sun Country flight. So it's a one ticket itinerary that would show up in the Department of Transportation's O&D survey. It would be counted as a ticket. So.
The only way you can make a reservation is on suncountry.com, correct?
Correct.
And when people show up at the airport and expect to get on an airplane, they find out they're on a bus. How do you mitigate that when they make that reservation?
So we have a number of disclosures in place throughout the booking process that, that notify customers of the fact that it's a multimodal itinerary, that, that this leg is operated on a bus. Some people, not everyone makes their own travel reservations. And so sometimes we do find that customers are surprised to find that, they're not showing up for a flight, but that they're showing up for us. But I think the cool thing is that, they already bought the elapsed time, for example, and they enjoyed the ticket price. And, if they didn't like the itinerary, sometimes people will buy air itineraries with long layovers, or that, take detours, way out of the way, and it's been a longer way, but they bought it and they were fine with it at that time. I think ultimately the cool thing about landline is that the onboard product is so great that it actually, and our net promoter scores are really high, and so it really helps to offset, it's a new concept for a lot of people, but it's a concept that once people try it, they really like it, and they try it again and try it again. So it's something that's there's definitely a risk of people maybe who didn't pay attention or had someone else book during the process, but then we usually win them over through the service, and then the convenient access to low fares and seamless itinerary, et cetera. So.
Can you said that you could buy just the bus service down to Minneapolis, down to the airport. Do you know about what that price point is typically? Ballpark.
So to ballpark, roughly $60.
Okay.
$55, $60.
I think that's probably gonna be, more utilized than we think it would be, so.
So would that show up in our Minneapolis OD, Nick, if someone just bought a Minneapolis ticket on landline?
If they just bought a Minneapolis ticket on landline, it would not show up in the demand data.
So how would they make that reservation?
They would make it on our direct distribution channel, landline.com.
Okay, so we couldn't do a Sun Country Minneapolis, Fargo, Minneapolis, reservation?
That's actually a good question. We have, I think that's absolutely something we could explore. I think we could definitely take a look at that to see if we could capture that as Sun Country demand. Let me take that as a takeaway and get back to you on that, John.
Because then you're driving a legitimate O&D passenger on the PDUs, so, then the PFC comes into play even more.
Yeah. Well, and actually, the PFC, and that's the other thing is, regardless of that, we would actually pay Fargo $450 per passenger, whether or not, they booked on suncountry.com or landline.com. So the airport would still be getting that person's parking revenue. They would still be getting it's actually not a PFC technically. It's a $4.50 cash payment from landline to Fargo that you can use however you want. You can use it for terminal upgrades. You can use it for janitorial services. You can use it however you want. There's no strings attached to that cash payment. So
that's just on the Fargo Minneapolis round trip, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, because on suncountry.com, they're collecting the PFC and then Sun Country's remitting that to us?
No, so actually for ground transportation, it's not a PFC, it's just a cash payment. So it's the $450 per passenger boarded.
Yeah. So Stacy and I worked with Nick and his attorney and had a draft agreement. It's pretty close to being done. We haven't put in the square footage for the ticket counter space, but I guess it's up to this board whether or not you want to dip your toes into this venture and allow them to start and see. Some countries provided service here for years, our casino charters, multiple charters a year, so there's some track record with their service in our community, but this is something new. It's a 2-year agreement. What's the desire of the board?
Well, I think any choice is a good choice. It gives the travelers an opportunity to say, well, what about this? May give the travel agencies an opportunity as well. So I would be in favor. What's the state of the board?
In my opinion, like I said, there's 3 other carriers in Minneapolis, Southwest, Spirit Airlines, and Alaska that don't have any service out of Fargo per se, and this would be another way for those passengers to connect into those networks out of Fargo, where they could park here and so forth. And then even when I was a airline pilot and commuting down to Minneapolis, sometimes the fares, the loads look terrible, and I would just drive myself, and it would have been nice just to hop on a bus and just not have to worry about it. So I just look at a lot of people, and when you look at passengers as a general, you have the higher paying passengers, and you have the people who can barely afford to get on a plane, and there is not a scarcity of passengers. There's plenty of people who want to travel. It's just, hey, I've got more money, I've got more time than money. And I think this is a good opportunity to get those people into our network. So I'm in favor.
Can we put that in the form of a motion, please?
One question here, and you say you've already we've negotiated an agreement, is it an exclusive agreement? If Trailway showed up or whatever and wanted to provide the same service, would we offer that? Or,
It's not an exclusive use of the first floor, but no, certainly with the bus company, they did talk about providing Jefferson lines out here at one point. It would not be exclusive. The only thing is if another company came in, maybe they have the agreement with Southwest, I guess, that's,
I'm
would
just
not be exclusive.
trying to say, it seems like it could be a powerful tool. And it's kind of which end of the scale you're on, which way it's sliding, because a large amount of our passenger base does come out of Minnesota, and there's some break point here that, would we want them, what would it take for Fargo to become the point of departure?
Holding the fare,
That,
the lowest fare.
yeah, so,
Convenience.
understand it, but would not favor an exclusive agreement so that if other people wanted to offer this, they could. And I'm wondering, just a logistics question, if you're not going on the Sun Country Airline, where do you get your baggage when you get to Minneapolis?
So Nick, if someone's just going to Minneapolis to the Mall of America, you pull up curbside at Minneapolis, they would get their luggage where? Curbside?
Yeah, so we have multiple baggage bays, and so what we actually do is for Sun Country tagged bags, we have, the back two bays that are reserved for that. And so the front bays are dedicated to, oversized carry-on luggage, just like on regional jet where you can't necessarily bring your carry-on board. You could not check it, you put that in the first bay. And then same would be for landline local passengers. So use the first bay for baggage that you couldn't bring on board. So it's the check bags that are kept sterile, and only our employees, once they're checked at Fargo, can access those bags. So
What kind of infrastructure would we need in Fargo? Like, where would the passengers board? How would the luggage be transferred to the bus? Like, does the bus go
that's a good
back
question.
onto the tarmac? Is it loaded on the end,
What would go up front?
out in front?
Curbside.
Yeah. So we would
That kind of
have
impedes That kind of impedes our flying
Sorry.
public then, that is utilizing that, the hotel pickup, you know what I mean? It seems like that would be a large stretch of space that we would need if they're parking right in front. Maybe they could park on the end.
Almost every day we have a bus out here, it's quickly hockey team here yesterday, I got dropped off, so
Okay,
I don't think that would be an issue.
So we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the contract with Landline.
Do we have a second?
Applicant seconds.
We have a motion and a second,
So
Stacy?
just subject to the changes and the end negotiations to finalize it?
Yes,
Okay.
subject to.
Subject to the changes and negotiations that Stacy comes up with, I make a motion.
All right, and Jen, you second?
Just
Discussion?
question, the counter space and everything, that's comparable to what the airline would be paying.
Yes, identical.
And not to weaken our position, but is the fee negotiable? How do you like $6 a passenger?
well, one thing we don't have is like the landing fees and, I think there is a potential loss of revenue as compared to people flying in and out of Fargo.
But if the intent is to capture a group of people that are not flying out of Fargo, that's the intent. We can make the comparison, well, maybe they are, but they've proven they're not. So I think we look at who's driving to Minneapolis and say for the benefit of the conversation, that's what they're trying to capture.
They're parking in the passenger fee that we're not getting now.
So is this agreement exclusive to Sun Country, or can they, once this agreement is done, they could go to the other carriers and say, hey,
They can carry passengers.
good for them, they're good. Very
One comment I would like to make is I think that it could help Delta come back and think, how could we be more competitive to capture that flying public? Because we're offering an alternative, which right now
Keeps them on.
Delta doesn't have to do, so who knows, it might be beneficial in that way.
So we have a motion and a second, any other discussion?
Just wanted to know if $6 is better than $4.50. Our friend at Landline got off.
I'm here as well. Oh, I didn't realize you were talking to me as I'm there.
Yeah.
Well, we're
So
keeping,
the question is,
I think the intent is to keep it consistent with the past. Right?
That's what it's based on.
Yeah.
But
yeah, because, yeah, I think our goal is also, for this to mirror, that in regard, what we'll want to eventually do is go to the DOT and actually, go say, hey, look, there's no difference in a passenger boarding a plane versus boarding this, multimodal connection. And so then that's how you can start to tie in, getting legislators at the DOT and at the FAA to start, tying additional benefits to a passenger boarded on a landline versus a bus. Like, ultimately, if you're getting credit for that, then that's, a positive. So try to make it as much as possible kind of for the legislators to see in that regard. So just the 450 is almost symbolic, but also represents revenue for the airport. So.
No, and I just, Paul, I appreciate your comments, and I think it's innovative. I think it's kind of exciting, but we also have to be aware if it's very, very successful. Instead of an airport, will be a bus depot running express buses to larger airports, and that will be our air service. So I think we need to understand what the public wants. Low fares, great connections, and this will help with that. But at the other end of it, it could have some very dramatic changes to flight patterns out of Fargo.
Well, I would agree, but I think that conversation's been had in most of the large metropolitan areas around the world where they have train service coming into airports.
Yep.
Metropolitan gathering points. I don't think it hurts anybody.
No,
It's a benefit to everything.
we just need to be aware that it's a possibility there.
Well,
High-speed rail in Fargo would be good.
Yep.
Not real.
when we were just looking at the advertising campaign last meeting where it's like, no potty breaks, no,
Yeah.
our competition to flying out of Fargo is fly out of Fargo instead of driving to Minneapolis. Now we're saying, hey, we're gonna make it easy for you to drive to Minneapolis.
But I think that's two different customers. I think that's two very different customers. It's if you have 4 kids and and you're gonna take a family of 6 on Delta to Minneapolis, it's $300 per seat per kid, per person. While this might be substantially less, and it would, instead of just hopping in the car and driving to Minneapolis themselves, maybe they park here and we get the passenger facility charge, we get the parking revenue, and then they go, that way. So you have 2 very different customers that you're trying to serve here, and this just opens the door for additional ways for them to use our airport.
I agree. I think it's nice for
Maybe you
Our-
can send
I think
the kids
ultimately-
in the bus.
Ultimately, we want that family of 6 flying, nonstop from Fargo to MCO, or Fargo to Fort Myers. So this is the fastest path to kind of get down that path.
I would love to see Sun Country come in and do maybe not a daily service, but to give people then the option, say their car's here, they have to go to Minneapolis for one leg, but they can return. So I think that's a great concept to strive for.
So we have a motion and a second, and any other discussion?
How many times a day does this bus come and when?
parks in the morning and returns in the evening. So
Once per day? Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Any other questions, discussion?
And just, it is non-exclusive, so if any other providers wanted to start running bus
Well,
service, they could.
Non-exclusive, but subject to space available at this point.
I don't see us having 10 bus.
A great problem to have.
Yeah, but it's not exclusive, so we don't have a problem if there were one that came in or,
We find space.
you know, maybe it starts the other direction. There's buses coming from other market area. If we draw our circle around our market area, buses could come into Fargo.
That's part of the plan as well.
One last question, how many seats are on your bus?
We have 46 seats when a normal motor coach is more like near 60. So we take off, 15, 12 to 15 seats, and then we just invest that back into the passenger experience to give extra leg room. So.
Thank you.
One more comment, maybe Wheaton Hunt could look at, so the logistics of people drag their luggage in, check it at the counter, and then they would turn around and haul that luggage out to the curb. Maybe we'd have a curb check outside, a bag check outside, or, something to make it so there's less rigmarole and less traffic going back and forth that's gonna impede our public.
I can comment on that quickly, actually, just because it's what we do with different operations with American and Sun Country today with Duluth. So we'll plan to have a check-in agent that will be collecting the bags, and then the check bags will be in, managed by the check-in agent and then the landline driver, and that they will ferry all those bags out at once, and so it won't be, a stream of passengers. It'll just be one organized cart that brings the bags out, the check bags out to the motor coach. They'll be boarded in the secure area, and then passengers will board. So.
Where would that secure area be?
Yeah.
Sure. We've only talked about boarding at the curb, Nick, not the secure area.
Sorry, and maybe not truly a secure area. What we use maybe secure is not the perfect word in an airport setting. This is just, it will be put onto a cart that our agent will be managing, and then we'll get the bags out to the curb.
So the bags could go through security and are checked and then loaded, or?
They do that in Minneapolis.
That's not in Minneapolis.
Okay.
Custody just ends.
Because we're kind of crowded now, traffic flow lines and whatnot on this end of the terminal, maybe because it was a completely different type of service, maybe if it was on the baggage claim end, then people could board on the end, or, maybe it would take the traffic flow away from the busy area, since it's doing something different. I don't know, I'm just throwing out ideas.
It's busy on that end.
Okay.
People getting picked up
And just
sit on the curb a long time versus usually on the other end, it's drop and go.
Okay.
And just to set expectation, from an operational standpoint, it's not like we're bringing 186 people here. It's going to be, it's a much more manageable, number. On a great day, it'll be 30, 35 people. It's not going to be, 180. So we find that, even though it's, for us it's a lot, it's not a lot for most airport footprints in terms of the incremental, if Spirit came, then that would be a different story in terms of, the number of passengers, or if Sun Country's nonstop 737, 800 came, then that would be a different story. So.
Good problems to have.
All right. Thank you.
Any other discussion? None? Roll call.
Lynn.
Aye.
Cosgrove.
Aye.
Capitan.
Aye.
Ekman.
Aye.
Henning.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to number 7, receive parking update from Greg at SB Plus.
Morning, Sean. Good morning, members of the board. Can everybody hear me and see my screen okay?
Yes.
Thank you. So yeah, this is perfect timing for an update on the parking rate increase that you all approved sometime back in September of last year. Obviously, we had the conversation about the impact that Landline's going to have on the parking operation looks like, and then also we talked a little bit about the November financials and what the driving factor behind some of those things. So as promised back when we presented this proposal or recommendation for the long term in the economy parking rate increase, we did say we were going to really keep a close eye on the revenue and make sure that, we weren't cannibalizing things in the sense of transactions, so to speak, and making sure that the revenue was commensurate with the increase in ridership or partnership in this case. Not only from the turn-up side, but also from the reservation side. So just to take you back through what I presented back in September for the rate analysis, and this is for the long-term lot exclusively. At the time, you were somewhere around $229,817, and we projected an increase to about $316,000, with a slight drop in people that would park based off the rate increase. And so we had an anticipated demand loss built in. And the good news is for the economy and for the long-term lot, through the first 2 months that we analyzed, based off this increase, we did not see a decrease in demand. And so that means people really didn't pay a whole lot of attention to the rate increase, to be honest with you, from a turn-up standpoint. But I think it also has a lot to do with the fact that you have reservations. And we kept really driving at home reservations with the dynamic pricing piece. The fact that we were explaining to passengers along the way that you can get those original rates if you desire. It just requires you to plan a little bit in advance, make a reservation, and then obviously have a stay duration that warrants the lesser rate per day, so to speak. And so the same thing for economy. We had anticipated, when we were collecting initially $31,753, and then we anticipated that increasing to $45,380 after the rate increase, and we had built in again another anticipated demand loss as well of about 30% with respect to the economy parking. And once again, we did not see any decrease in those that were parking in the economy lots over the 2 months that were evaluated during this period. So to give you some really concrete numbers of what that looks like, tickets collected is what we use to kind of really evaluate and make sure that the transactions actually increased over this period. And if you look at October of 2022, you're 11% higher than September. And October 1 was the first day of the rate increase. And so your amount of tickets that were pulled went up by 11%. And then if you compare it year over year to October of 2021, there was a 7% increase. And I just put this note here just to remind you that you didn't have reservations with dynamic pricing a year ago in October of 2021. From a revenue standpoint, your revenue went up by 54% for the same month in comparison to October of 2021, so that's year over year. It's good to compare apples to apples, so to speak. I didn't want to compare October to September in this case because October in airports world is typically higher than September with federal return to school and things of that nature. And then November, 34% higher than year over year November 2021 number. So looking at both months year over year, revenue increased substantially over those months. And then the revenue number specifically, if you look at October of 2022, you were at $483,000. And then if you look at October 2021, you're at $312,000. So a lot has moved the needle with respect to parking with this rate increase. The fact that you have more people pulling tickets, more people parking with you since the rate increase in tandem with higher rates for the most part. It's something that you can now benchmark and plan for with respect to improvements and how you want to spend those dollars throughout the airport. One thing I decided to introduce in the analysis was called a parking revenue per employment. And a lot of times this comes from my airport days of cost per employment, so to speak. We always try to see how much airlines are paying from the sense of cost per employment. So I turned this around and said, let's look at what the revenue you're generating for every enplaned passenger. And so if you look at it year over year, you went up by about $4 for the month of October, and then about $3 for the month of November. And so this is important to know and see because now you can kind of look at this as well and say, as your employment increase, this is what you can expect with respect to every person that enplanes a plane out of Fargo, $12.21 for the month of October and $12.27 for November. And so it just gives you a baseline and something to plan for again with respect to enplanements. And now again with landline coming on board, since they'll be considered enplaned passengers, so to speak, this is kind of how you can use this number to plan for that additional passenger base that you're tapping into with that decision. So this is circles back to the feasibility study for the parking garage that we presented last, I believe it might have been the month of July or so. And obviously, based off the parking rate increase and the fact that there was no drop in demand, we actually would really need to revisit this at this point to make sure that the projections that we initially and the assumptions that we made are more in alignment now with the increased parking rates. And also the fact that we have reservations built into this as well, which I'll speak to on the next slide. But it's just to show you that initially what we had shared with you was these numbers up here in short term, long term in the economy. And now look what these numbers are within, the first year one based off the projection. And obviously this is taking October, if you will, and then just annualizing it over a 12-month period. And so it's definitely moved the needle to north of $5 million as opposed to where you were sitting here with approximately $4 million or so in revenue. So it's definitely had an impact, and then we just applied the same employment growth of 1.5% each year. But it's just really to speak to the fact that that 1,500 space scenario, from a revenue standpoint, the projection really needs to be recalculated and re-looked at. And the good thing is the way we built the model, that's easy to do. You just really go in and change your assumptions, look at the period that you want to look at and annualize it out. And then that way we can kind of see how it compares to what we shared with you last summer. So the biggest takeaways here in reservation revenue is the one outlier that was not included in those percentage increases that I shared with you before. But if we look at the reservation revenue as well, that increased by 54% in comparison to September of 2022. And then same thing with that, we wanted to make sure the transactions were not being cannibalized based off the rate increase. And we see that if we compare October to September, they certainly weren't. And the only reason I'm not doing year over year here again is because you didn't have reservations in September of 2021 or October of 2021. But you'll see the transactions increase. They went from 353 to 387 between the 2 months, between the rate increase. Once again, 0% demand loss in comparison to what we had projected. So that's great news. Revenue was $26,000 higher than what we projected. And that's a lot to do with the removal of the weekly pricing. Weekly pricing was really competing against the dynamic pricing component. And so you had passengers that maybe would rather benefit from the weekly pricing as opposed to going online and making a reservation and benefit from the dynamic pricing. So now that that's gone, there's no need to compete against that anymore. And similar to the economy parking lot, 0% demand loss. Revenue was $6,302 higher than what was projected. And then obviously we had an increase in online reservations, and that was specific to the economy parking lot. The vast majority of our reservations fall within that economy parking lot. So that's your price sensitive customers that really want to get a price point as low as possible when they take those long travel trips. So that concludes my presentation, but I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Gregory, this is Sean. Can you send me that updated deck that you just presented? The one that we had for our packet doesn't look quite good stuff.
It is. I appreciate it. I'll send that to you right after this meeting.
No questions, thank you.
John? Nope. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Moving on to number 8, discuss airport equipment technician position.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I have a question on that parking.
Yes. Go ahead.
I've had quite a few comments about people entering to go to the long-term parking lot. They enter the lot and then find out that the lot is full. They're not aware of our east parking lot. Is there some way we can advertise that or have the parking lot advertise it before they get in the lot that the lot is full so they don't, pay to get in and then find out the lot is full so they can go to the east, the overflow parking lot?
Good question.
Yeah, I can jump in on one piece of that if that's okay. So we did run into some challenges during the holiday period, and my hope is that's when you were receiving those comments was over the holiday period. Ideally, what we really need to be doing and should be doing is for reservations, we always know that in advance because you have to book your reservation so many hours in advance, so to speak. And so the lot is always going to remain open for those that have a reservation for it, so to speak. And so sometimes we may close the lot in advance because we have to accommodate for individuals that made a reservation for the lot. One action we took recently was we did update the map. Darren actually brought that to our attention that we didn't actually have the map outlined with the new East Economy parking lot, so we made that update pretty recent. Another thing that we're doing is we're actually meeting with the Flink group as well. And part of that is to meet and also have them meet with the head of marketing for Cabu, who is the third party we use for reservations. And it's to really emphasize and get the word out that, to your point, that we do have another East Economy parking lot. And so when you make a reservation for economy lot, or if you're just turning and driving up the park in general, since that's actually the first lot you'll see when you come up to the airport, we want to give you really good guidance and good directions and let you know that that lot is an option. So when you're making that reservation, it's not just the one that you typically parked at before. You can also park on the east side as well on the East Economy lot. So we're looking at ways to get the word out and do that through campaigns and social media and things like that. So that's a meeting that we're having actually next week. We'll definitely keep that at the forefront and make sure that we can communicate that as best as possible.
Eric, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I have one more question. Is there a way that you can put, when you drive up and grab a ticket, can you put the number of spaces remaining like on the display? So when people are grabbing a ticket, they know that there's only 5 spots left in that lot or anything like that?
I can look into that. I know we can do it from the standpoint of a separate sign. It's called space counting sign.
Yep.
Like, so when you drive up, you can say, okay, this lot has this many spaces remaining. That can definitely be done. But let me see if that's an option to have it on the display screen so you can know when you're going through the lot, how many spaces you have.
Okay.
There's one variable where people park and take up a spot in the corner because they don't wanna get close to the car that's snowed in, and that's a variable that it's.
And that's kind of the Christmas issue of the snow game, and pretty soon your lot utilization rate went way down just because of.
And the snow piles take spaces.
Because I've heard the same, where people say, they're driving into the long-term lot and they're going up and down the aisles looking for a spot and it's full. And so like when you park in Minneapolis, they say, this many spots left. And I know that the snow is a variable, but it'd be nice if we could, work in a little buffer just to let our traveling public know when they're maybe short on time and that they don't have half an hour to drive around looking for a spot in the lot that's full. Like just to direct them right away to economy or.
Yeah, we typically never close the lot once they get to the exact threshold because we always, like you said, want to have that buffer and then reopen it once we get below that threshold again. But I'll look at some space count and signage options as well and get back with Sean and the team and get you an answer on some of those questions you had.
Greg, you were gonna look in to see if we had access to the zip codes from the credit cards.
I was. I'm still working on that. I should have an answer based off of talking to corporate by the end of this week. And I'll get you that answer so you can disseminate that to the board as well. It seems, and I probably shouldn't say this, it sounds like we likely can capture that information, but they wanted to double check one more time just to make sure. So I should have an answer for you by the end of this week.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Jim, anything else? None? Then let's move on to,
One comment, I thought I heard on the news Alaris was claiming to have the first reserved online parking system in North Dakota. Did we miss an opportunity to be the first?
I'm not sure. Alaris,
Yeah, their facility, so,
Clearly it's lies.
yeah. Fake news.
all right, let's move on to airport equipment technician position.
This is on the agenda because our mechanic, heavy equipment mechanic has notified us that he intends to leave here sometime this spring. So with the demand for mechanics in the area being very, very tight, we want to start the process now to get a mechanic on board. So we probably be running 2 equipment technicians or mechanics for a period of time until our current mechanic decides to move there as well, is what is before us, so. So Darren is here, Andrew Holman, our airside operations supervisor as well. There's two things on here. We also have a need for a kind of a second mechanic, part-time mechanic, if you will, because of the demand for the equipment. And we have an opportunity to hire someone in airport equipment technician 2 position, a new position that we created, which would be part mechanic and also equipment operator. So there's an extra set of hands for that. So in creating that position, the airport technician 3 is just a renamed position. It's the same pay scale, A9, as what was in place prior, just 3. And that is the position that we would like to hire another full-time airport equipment technician 3, the renamed position, along with an airport equipment technician 2, which is a part-time mechanic, and also airfield equipment operator. So they came up with the A6 pay is a combination of, as it says on the bottom of your sheet there, the A5 and A7, just kind of down the range. It stays in line with the 11-step scale with 36% range spread for that area. We always have the ability, myself or Darren, to place an employee anywhere in the 11-step scale based on their experience. What we're asking for today is that one, you'd allow us to pursue immediately the advertising for what will be now an airport equipment technician 3, along with a new position, which is an airport equipment technician 2, the part-time mechanic, and also an equipment operator position. So I don't know, Darren, if there's anything you want to add, or Andrew?
Yeah, so we're really only like adding one person temporarily. The second position, actually, we have another employee that's leaving, but we're gonna create that hybrid of a part-time mechanic, part-time equipment operator, so it's just that one position just moving up like a pay scale per se, but we wanna bring the new mechanic, the 3 we're calling it, on board now, so he can be with our present mechanic until our present mechanic departs. That makes sense.
So our airfield maintenance
Absolutely.
specialist 2 is a position that we created, the board approved. It's a person that isn't required to have a commercial driver's license. Like I say, as Darren said, one of our airfield maintenance specialists 2 is notified us that he's leaving. Someone that we just hired not that long ago, but he got an opportunity with federal service. He's a retired Marine veteran, and wanted to be in the federal service. So he's so like I say, there will be an overlap if you approve this until our current mechanic leaves, which I think will be timeframe.
So you want to hire airport equipment technician 2 and a 3?
That's correct. That's correct.
And create the A2.
So there's really only a net increase of 1 employee for a short period of time.
Mr. Chairman, and want to be careful on this, that and I know we're trying to solve an immediate problem, but one of the problems that we start to have in pay scales is when we're, and I'm not sure this is the case, that we're creating positions to allow higher pay scales than the current structure has. And as you do that, you solve individual problems, but you create overall problems in the pay scale. And so now the position above or below this might look and say we have these similar items. So I would just be cautious and hope that our HR contractor would be looking that we don't sort of try to solve a pay problem, a pay scale problem by creating positions, because your whole system will start to get out of whack on you. And so in creating new positions, I would just hope that we're sticking to a procedure of looking at the duties assigned and assigning the value to that so that you don't create a problem. I'm sure the city of Fargo is having the same problem, that the tendency is to look and say, okay, we've got a problem with this position. If we fix this position, then we're back in line. But what you really create is sort of discord amongst the whole pay scale and hierarchy of positions and responsibility. And that's my only concern here. And I know you need to deal with this short term, but we really should have some adherence to looking at these positions from some standard measure as to what's required of the position, what are the qualifications, is there supervision, what are the different things, and band it accordingly. So,
Well, I
this is
do
more
think
cautionary
the
than.
commercial license requirement becomes an issue, and that solves some problems.
I'll just tell you that the city of Fargo for a long time practiced creative position descriptions to affect that. And that was one of the big problems, is the pay scale got completely out of whack. And so, what we're not doing here is kind of studying what's the change in responsibilities other than the one item we said, a commercial driver's license.
That's pretty substantial.
Right, but we aren't, we need to have a system to look at that it doesn't just become, oh, well, if we require
I would
this.
agree, a system would be great, but it's one individual that they're splitting duties, and I don't think it takes an in-depth analysis of it to get that.
Well, you've only got.
Especially in this economy,
Yeah,
in
well,
this environment.
I understand the environment and everything else, but, you're talking 1 out of 35 positions, and so it is significant, and it will ripple through your whole pay scale. That you just need to be consistent, and like I said, are we solving a problem with this position that may be better solved by an overall increase to the overall pay scale of everybody?
I just wanted to add, how we came up with this position, we took the high position and the lower position. We got to half of each, so it's not like we created a brand new,
No.
IT manager for the airport.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need another full-time mechanic, but, so we took half of his job description and then the bottom level equipment operator.
Yeah.
That's kind of how we came to that, so yes, it is a new position, but yet it's a combination of 2 positions existing, so.
I just think we need to be careful that we have a discipline to it, because pay scales do get out of whack over time for a variety of reasons, and then you find yourself doing a whole pay study and trying to bring everything back into alignment, so that.
Some of us have lived through that APEC process, so I think the benefit of those that have, and the mayor who sat in on one of those, and I think that exercise woke us up to a lot of the stresses to this, and I think Sean's done a good job of that. I don't see this going outside scope to be an issue.
No. Well, the position evaluation committee continues with the city of Fargo. It disbanded here for the airport, which I wish it wouldn't have, because it is something that should go through a process. And even if you're combining those 2 positions, because the next thing that'll happen is, wait, now that position we need more of, so we're going to break it again and hire one higher and one lower. So just cautionary as we
Jim,
approach
did you have a
this.
comment? Mr. Capitan?
Yes,
Did you have a comment?
yes.
Go ahead.
No, I'm trying to get this phone to work.
Okay, all right, you're sounding good.
Now we need a phone technician.
I don't have a comment on, well, with the exception that we're kind of running through that same thing on the county level, where we lose a person and then we hire somebody else that's got quite a bit of experience. And so we've asked, the department head will come and ask to put him in probably a step 3 rather than starting him out at step 1. So he's at a comparable pay scale. And we've gone to Gallagher, who's kind of done this has approved it every time, so. That's my only comment.
And the only other position that we're currently looking at is Jordan's position, which should have been done probably a year ago. Retitling that position along with the new duties that he has. So Jordan's provided a new job description with those changed duties that were actually in place a year ago. with Snow Boss, backup payroll and those nature, just trying to come up with what the proper title should be. It's not really an airport operations and maintenance coordinator, it's something different. So we're gonna engage Linda Frankel at ADK to work with that along with Pro Resources and bring that before you as well to get his position where it should be. Should have been maybe a year ago. So we're working on that right now.
Commissioner Strand, does City of Fargo still use decision band method or black magic, or how do they come up with theirs?
I don't know.
I think they are. That's an exercise you went through on qualifications and responsibilities.
My eyes glaze over.
It actually works very well. Once you get used to it, it works very well.
To me, it's more of just the discipline of going through it, and
That's what we base it on.
having that. So I wonder if our Pro Resources or our HR consultant could just give us some insight into it. But I really want to be careful in this time that we're in, that when we should be facing the overall consequences of increased wages across our whole pay scale, that we just kind of jump in and start trying to fix individual positions, which is a temporary fix, and not look at pay scale as a whole.
Well, I do think, John, your comment to look at the whole pay scale is probably closer than we think with construction season again ramping up. That those are burdens on all of us for trying to find good help and keep them.
I think when the PEC met, the APEC, it was kind of a point that do a salary survey for firefighters every 3 years or every 5 years. We could do it on a 5-year scale thing. And with all the positions, I guess we'd have to go back and figure out what that date is to do the salary survey. You know, if it was every 3 or 5, they'd go back in minutes and see what the board had suggested.
Well, and again, with the overlap between actually Jim with the county and the city, maybe there's some benefit to going together on salary studies for all three entities that are.
We found that was a problem because it's so unique here, and that's why we.
Well, again, it's the tough part about salary surveys is everybody's job descriptions are different, and so you don't have this perfect fit, but what you do have is within a broader definition, your pay ranges, and so we're all in that same employment pool, and so a heavy equipment operator is a very generic term, and we could have specifics here that would differentiate it, but from a salary study, you can get that general to say this is what the pool we're drawing from, and so.
And once we do that, we throw the rock in the pond, and then we make ripples, and then the city has to do it, and then the county has to do it, and then everybody else.
Yeah.
And like you said, we had 10% inflation, so our pay scale did not go up 10%. So it's probably time that we look at it again, unfortunately. But to get back to the business at hand, I would like to make a motion for the executive team to be able to hire the airport equipment technician 2 and 3 as needed.
And create the.
And create this position.
We have a motion? We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? No other discussion? Roll call, please.
Lynn.
Aye.
Cosgrove. Capitan. Capitan.
Yeah, yes.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to number 9, airport construction and security update.
Terry, sorry to keep you waiting. I want you to go first.
You bet. Okay, well, thanks. Things are going to plan out at the Active Plaza. We're hoping to still secure a CO by the end of the week. I think as you remember, Flash Parking will not engage anything until we have a CO. And then it's typically, I think told the airport that, or the construction people that it's about a 2-week process after they did that before they'll, 2 to 3 weeks before they'll end up at the site and put their equipment in. Probably the only thing that's been, a delay has been the exterior siding on the project. They, were MIA, I guess, last week. They are from out of town because this product is, kind of not used a lot around here. So they're hoping to get them back, but, it shouldn't, have any issues with once flash parking's done, we should be done by then on the outside and be able to be operational. So yeah, so they're right on schedule, and I'm guessing within the next couple of weeks, we'll probably have a final punch list to go through.
Jerry, one question, when will the Lind Exit Plaza sign be put up?
I believe that's an airport issue, not mine.
Oh. Appreciate your support.
Eric, if you'll stop by the Innovation Lab at Park, we can do the full body scan and have your statue ready to go.
I'd be happy to do that.
All right, I'll keep this quick here. So as you know, me and Hutch is working on 3 apron projects. They're at various stages of completion at the moment. So there's South J, North J, and then the terminal apron for the terminal building. The terminal apron is probably, I would say, 30% done right now. Sean and Darren and Andrew will need some time from you this week or next just to go over where we're at. There's some decisions to be made there on configuration of storm sewer and everything. The North GA is about 60% done. We should have those plans done this week. We'll get those out to the airport for review, and then I guess the next step beyond that, we'd also want to meet with Fargo Jet Center just to make sure what we have in the design is accommodating their needs, see what comments that they have so we can incorporate those. And then the South GA is probably 90% complete. Next steps in that obviously would be doing like a page turn of the plan set with the airport authority, as well as later this week we have a meeting with Terracon to figure out what we want to do with contaminated soil down in the South GA apron, figuring out a plan on how to deal with that. So, and then the other thing I'll mention is within the next, I'd say 2-3 weeks, we should have the plans complete for the Oregon Bridge number 4 out here. So.
Anything else for Jeff?
Will we have an opportunity to tour the exit plaza?
Very soon.
Can 3D print that one?
Yeah, we can give you a model of it too.
So just some miscellaneous stuff. Scott Selzler from First International is on board. Scott, thanks. They increased our rate to 3.5% on all of our accounts. So thanks for doing that. That's up from 3 or 3 and change. So I don't know if you have anything else to add, Scott. You're there.
There is.
Yeah, something new to happen.
All right. Thanks for doing that. Any questions of Scott? Anything with the bank? The last few weeks, around the country, lots of issues with passenger service, weather, animals, meltdowns, all kinds of different stuff. And Darren can probably tell us how many thousand seats we lost here just because of weather and canceled flights, but 3,000 plus seats we probably lost in the market, so that really drove down, and we're filling well over 80% of those seats, close to 90% of those seats. So our December stats are going to be down so much just because of those cancellations, the weather, the cannibals. We've had some significant issues with getting access to gates. The 5 gates that we have, last Thursday was kind of one of those disasters. We had a couple of charters, plus all the scheduled service. Some of the scheduled service was a mechanical delay, tied up the gate. An aircraft could not be moved from gate 1 because there was no hydraulics and brakes. So now you're working with 4 gates. So when you have multiple airplanes, we have people sitting on airplanes for an hour plus waiting to get off. It's just something that we can't get this expansion done fast enough for what we've been experiencing over the last few years. It's just horrendous. Ground handling people are doing as much as they can to try and mitigate that. One of our plow trucks, the brakes locked on it here a few weeks ago and it started on fire, but we're trying to find parts. I don't know, Andrew, do you have any update on where we're at, trying to find
With
parts?
that one, they're still searching for parts.
Yeah.
They got the other one going.
20-some-year-old Oshkosh truck, the brakes locked and it's on fire, they put it out with the extinguishers and so forth. So that one's down for a little bit. We've had a mechanic here from McQueen and Sioux Falls, going through all of our Oshkosh equipment and trying to find parts on a timely basis, to keep all the brooms and plows and blowers operational along with the fire trucks. So that's been a big help for us. Let's see, I guess the final thing, at Chief Bush, you're still on? So Chief Bush gave us notice January 9th that his official notification that he plans to retire. His last day would be June 16th. So we will start a process here, the board's help to do a search for a fire chief, whether that's an internal candidate, a national search, or what have you. But he did give us notice, and we do have some time to look for a fire chief, so that's all that I have, Mr. Chair.
All right, anything else for the good of the order?
Our next meeting will be our annual meeting, so we'll rotate the chairs and so forth.
So to go back to the marketing presentation, when does the contract for Flint end and when would we look at?
We don't have a contract, it's an annual renewal of their services as it's been. But when you approved what they did for 2023, 24, 25, it's a 3-year theme that they've created for the airport. So I don't know what their expenses are to create that theme. But, certainly it's more than marketing, it's PR, it's the crisis communication, things of that nature. But if you so desire, we can put out an advertisement sometime mid-summer for services. See what's out there.
Okay.
Anything else? Good order, nothing. Meeting adjourned.